In the last class, we looked at an ordinary nozzle for a turbojet engine, and we saw how it operated in thrust reverse mode. Today we will start our lecture by looking at the nozzle for an afterburner. The nozzle for the afterburner has to be a little bit more special because it has to accomplish, in addition to the two things that we talked about. For example, we said that the purpose of a nozzle is to produce thrust, and also it must be used for thrust reversing. Now, an afterburner nozzle will not have the capability to have thrust reversing, so it will produce thrust, but in addition it must also be able to operate with the afterburner on. So the nozzle is somewhat specialized, and as you can see from here, the nozzle is longer because there is a constant area duct where we inject fuel. So you can see the fuel manifold. So we inject fuel from here, and flame stabilizers or V-gutters are provided here, and the V-gutters provide stabilization. They always provide a region of low circulation, low speed fluid, which always keeps the kernel of a flame on, so that the flame can go on continuously, and the combustion takes place in this portion of the afterburner. This is the duct where the heat release takes place, and the stagnation temperature is increased. So when the stagnation temperature is increased and the air then comes out through the conversion nozzle, we get higher thrust for short durations of time. Notice that the tail end of the nozzle itself is very specialized, because when the afterburner is not operating, then the cross-sectional area of the nozzle is smaller, and when the afterburner is operating, the cross-sectional area should become larger. This was something that we saw when we discussed Rayleigh flow, and you can see these segments. So the nozzle is actually made up of many segments. It is not a single piece. It is made up of many of these segments, and it is attached to a sleeve which moves forwards and backwards, and as it moves forwards and backwards, the segments spread like petals of a flower to be wide open or to be closed. Okay, so you can see that here. So you see the segments in the nozzle. When it is in the closed position, you can see that they are all close together. And when the afterburner is in operation, you can see that the petals are spread apart like this, and you can see the gaps in between the segments, and this increases the cross-sectional area of the nozzle, because as you know, when T0 increases, the area has to increase to pass the same amount of mass flow rate. Okay? And here you can see the afterburner in operation with the nozzle cross-sectional area being more than what it was before. Because the nozzle is complicated enough as it is, normally the aircraft that use this, which are usually military aircraft, do not actually have thrust reversers for this. And normally these aircraft are braked by means of parachutes. So you deploy parachutes, which is called para-braking, and the parachutes provide the braking when these aircraft land, or if they are land on an aircraft carrier, then you brake them using arrest cables. So there is a lever that comes out of the bottom of the aircraft, which catches the arrest wire on the deck, and that brings it to a halt. Okay, so they will not do thrust reversal, but they can be used for both without afterburner operation and with afterburner operation. So the nozzle becomes more complicated mechanically, but the advantage, as we discussed earlier, is the afterburner can give a good amount of thrust augmentation for short periods of time without increasing the engine size unduly. So the increase in complexity is considerable, but increase in weight is not considerable. So this is actually a good choice for thrust augmentation for short periods of time. Okay. Now that brings us to a close on our discussion of the basic turbojet engine. So we saw the different components of the turbojet engine, and the design features, and then other considerations for the different components, operational details, off-design operation, what are the issues in off-design operation. We saw all those details for a basic turbojet engine. And now what we are going to do is to take a look at turbofan engine, which is what is widely used in commercial aviation today. So what we will try to do is we will try to see the need for a turbofan engine. Why is that? Where does a turbofan engine fit in? Why do we need another one? We discussed propellers versus jet, and we saw that there were some deficiencies of a propeller which were addressed by a turbojet. Now we try to see, we also saw some of the deficiencies of a turbojet, and then we will try to see where a turbofan fits in this scenario. Okay. So let us go through a quick recap of what we discussed earlier with regard to propulsion technologies. And if you remember, we said that the propulsion device must generate thrust, and we said that there are two ways of doing it. One is to use a propeller which as we said earlier accelerates a larger amount of mass through a small change in velocity, right. And the advantages that we listed for the propeller, the advantages are listed in green, the disadvantages are in black. Okay. So we saw that the efficiency of a propeller can be very high, propulsive efficiency can be very high. It also has a long life, mainly because it does not deal with hot air. The propeller itself is not exposed to high temperature or high pressure. That is a big advantage. So consequently it has a much longer life, but it is very noisy mechanically. That was what we had listed earlier. And the other alternative, as we saw, was jet propulsion, which accelerates a smaller mass of air through a large change in velocity. But the large change in velocity, as we discussed, was accomplished through two things. Firstly, we wanted to increase the specific enthalpy, and we increase the specific enthalpy by doing two things. One is to increase the pressure, the other is to increase the temperature, which means that the components are exposed to high temperature and high pressure, and also high RPMs, which means the life is going to be short, and the efficiency is also not very high or not as high as a propeller for the same flight speed. Okay. So if you take a low subsonic flight speed, which is the limitation of a propeller, let us say that you have a propeller which has maximum efficiency at low subsonic flight speed. If you try to fly a turbojet at the same flight speed, the efficiency will be less. But the advantage of a jet is that it allows you to cruise at high subsonic flight speeds, where its efficiency is almost comparable to a propeller, and actually it is better than that of a propeller. When compared to a propeller, it is better, okay, but the life is short because of the exposure to high pressure, high temperature and cyclical loading, and it is also noisy, not from a mechanical perspective but from an aerodynamic perspective. The mixing of the high speed exhaust with the ambient causes a lot of aerodynamic noise. So now we can see that this addresses some of the disadvantages of this, but not all. Okay. So the turbofan hopefully will address the disadvantages of both these, plus keep the retain the advantages of both these, right. So that is what we are looking for in a turbofan engine. It is actually I will not say it is a hybrid, it is a combination of both the ideas. Both the ideas being, if I generate most of my thrust in this fashion, using by imparting a small velocity change to a large mass of air, cold air, that seems to be very good from a efficiency and a life perspective. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I can attain high subsonic flight speeds. So the idea is, why not produce bulk of the thrust using this type of an idea and produce the rest of the thrust using this type of an idea while retaining this advantage, right. That is what a turbofan does. So the turbofan engine generates about 75 to 80% of the thrust using a fan, which uses only a cold air. Okay. So the fan is not exposed to high pressures or high temperatures, and the fan produces about 75 to 80% of the thrust. The fan is not quite the same as a propeller. There are differences between the two, and we will highlight those differences, but the idea is essentially the same. Idea being imparting a small velocity change to a large mass of air. Okay. So the fan does that, and the remainder of the thrust, about 20 to 25%, comes from a high speed jet, okay, which handles actually hot air. So the hot jet generates about 20 to 25% of the thrust. That is the idea behind the turbofan engine. We get to replace all the advantages of the propeller and the efficiency of the jet, meaning this is very efficient and it has a longer life, and it also allows high subsonic flight Mach numbers, cruise Mach numbers. Okay, so let us quickly look at the highlights of turbofan engine. So the most significant noteworthy feature of a turbofan engine is a big fan. Some call it a ducted propeller, but that is probably not correct, but in some sense it is correct, in some sense it is not correct. Okay? It is probably similar to a propeller, but not same as a propeller. Yeah? A big fan is mounted in the front of the engine, and what happens is the fan, because it is so big, it captures the air comes into the fan, and much of the air that comes into the fan goes through the fan, only a small amount goes through the core turbojet engine. So the core is a turbojet engine, there is a big fan in the front. So only part of the air that goes into the fan goes through the core turbojet engine, the remainder goes around the turbojet engine. Okay? So the rest of the air is bypassed around the turbojet engine, only a small portion goes through. Yeah? So as you can see from here, only some amount or some fraction of the total captured air goes through the combustor, the rest goes through the fan. Okay? And as we said, the fan accelerates a greater mass of air through a lower velocity change, and thereby it has very high propulsive efficiency. Okay? Now the noise problem is also addressed to a large extent in a turbofan. The mixing of the cool air from the fan, which goes around the core engine, mixes with the high speed hot air from the hot exhaust or the core engine exhaust, and that reduces the aerodynamic noise to some level, to a large extent. Okay? Still a turbofan engine is also noisy, but less noisy, much less noisy than a turbojet engine. Okay? So remember, when we went from propeller to turbojet, we traded mechanical noise to aerodynamic noise. But now in going from turbojet to turbofan, we have reduced the aerodynamic noise also, because the slower fan stream mixes with the hot high speed exhaust that comes out of the core engine, and the mixing process reduces the average velocity. Because aerodynamic noise is dependent upon the velocity difference between the jet and the surrounding air, since the average velocity goes down, the noise also goes down. Okay? Now bypass ratio is a concept that is a metric that is used to describe a turbofan engine. Bypass ratio is the ratio of air that is bypassed around the engine, core engine, to the air that goes through the core engine. In other words, if the engine captures, let us say, 11 kg per second of air and the bypass ratio is 10, then that means 1 kg per second goes through the core engine and 10 kg per second goes through the outer engine, fan nozzle. Okay? So 10 to 1, for every 11 kg, 10 is ducted outside the core engine, 1 kg per second goes through the core engine. Typical commercial aircrafts today will have bypass ratios as high as 9. So this would be 9 would be classified as a high bypass ratio turbofan engine. Bypass ratios around 3 to 4 or 5 are usually classified as low bypass ratio or moderate bypass ratio engines. Low bypass would be less than 1. For example, military aircraft sometimes have bypass ratios less than 1, that is low. 3, 4 or 5 is about moderate bypass ratio, and 9 is high bypass ratio. 12, 13, 14 will be ultra high bypass ratio engines. So these kinds of bypass ratio engines generally produce about 80% of the thrust from the fan. Okay, let us take a look at some more concepts and then see why bypass ratio engine or bypass turbofan engine makes sense. Okay? So here I have plotted propulsive efficiency versus flight speed. Remember, we said that we wanted the flight speeds to be in the high subsonic Mach number range. So that means we are typically talking about flight Mach numbers of about 1000 kilometers per hour or so at altitudes of about 35,000 feet, 35 to 40,000 feet, no more than that. Okay? So you can see from here, based on the definition of the bypass ratio that we just gave, you can easily see that a turbojet engine will have a bypass ratio of 0. Nothing is sent around the engine, all the air that is captured goes through the core engine, so that has a bypass ratio of 0. So you can see the variation of the propulsive efficiency for the pure turbojet engine. On the other hand, a propeller, you can think of the propeller as having a bypass ratio of infinity, because all the air that is captured is sent around and there is no core engine. So that means the bypass ratio itself is actually infinity. So, this is the propeller. So, these are the two extremes in terms of bypass ratios. So, you can see that the propulsive efficiency of the propeller increases, attains a peak around flight Mach numbers probably around 0.5 or so, 0.5, 0.6. Okay. And then as we said earlier, the tip speed becomes higher than the speed of sound. So, we have shocks and losses. So, then it begins to fall. So, you can see that if you compare the efficiency of a turbojet with that of a propeller at low flight Mach numbers, then you can see that the propeller wins hands down. But if you go to high flights, high subsonic Mach number flight speed, then you can see that the propeller efficiency falls and the turbojet catches up and then exceeds at these kinds of speeds. And this was the reason why we migrated from propeller to turbojet. But the efficiency is still not as high as what the propeller can provide. And that was what we were talking about. We wanted to retain all the advantages of a propeller and all the advantages of a turbojet. One of the biggest advantages of the propeller is the efficiency, because this efficiency directly translates to fuel economy. This is still low compared to this. So, what we want are these kinds of efficiencies and these kinds of speeds, which is precisely what a bypassed engine provides. Okay. So, you can see that low bypass engines where the bypass ratio is less than 5, but generally greater than 1, you can see is about the efficiencies at this flight speeds are comparable to that of the peak efficiency of a propeller. Okay. In fact, if you go high bypass, you can see that for these flight speeds the efficiency is even greater than the peak efficiency of a propeller. In fact, if you move into the ultra high bypass ratio, the efficiencies will be even higher than this. And as you can imagine, that is where the industry is headed today. Ultra high bypass ratio turbofan engines, bypass ratios more than 10, 12 and so on. Okay. So, the engines that we are going to talk about today will all be in the low to probably high bypass ratio. So, I can clearly see the reason why it makes sense to migrate to a turbofan engine from a turbojet engine. The efficiency is better, aerodynamic noise is reduced, and engine life is also longer because 80% of the thrust is produced by the fan, which is not exposed to high pressure or high temperature. Okay. So, it makes sense in every aspect to migrate to turbofan engine technology, which is what happened probably in the 80s or so. From the 80s onwards, we started migrating towards turbofan engines, but the migration was not without challenges. Many times there are technologies which sound very promising on paper, but which are impossible to realize. And the turbofan almost proved to be such a technology. Okay. These are all theoretical calculations, right. Theoretical calculations indicate that the efficiencies can be very high. Can we realize them in practice is the challenge that engineers faced when they migrated to this technology. Let us look at the engines and then we will look at the challenges. So, here we are looking at mid-size engine from GE. This is a CF6 engine typically used in Airbus A320 and Boeing 737 and so on. Mid-size aircraft. This is not the largest engine that GE makes. We will look at that next. So, you can see the general features of the engine. There is a big fan in the front, as you can see. There is an intermediate pressure compressor and there is a high pressure compressor. So, you can see the fan blades and the area decreasing here, and then you see the combustor here. High pressure turbine, single stage high pressure turbine drives the 7 or 8 stages of a high pressure compressor. That is because the blade loading coefficient of a turbine stage can be much higher than a compressor. So, a single high pressure turbine can drive 7 or 8 stages of a high pressure compressor. So, similarly you see single one stage of an IP turbine, and then you see multiple stages of the low pressure turbine, and then you see the nozzle for the hot gas. So, this is called the core stream. So, the air is captured here and some part of the air goes through this core engine. This is called the core engine, and this nozzle is called the core engine nozzle. So, the core engine handles high pressure, high temperature air. Okay. So, the nozzle also handles reasonably high pressure, reasonably high temperature air. So, this is called the hot exhaust or hot nozzle. In contrast, the rest of the air goes through the fan. These are the rotating fan blades. You see a set of stationary fan blades, and then you see the fan nozzle. This is why a fan is different from a propeller. Remember, we looked at a propeller some time back, and the propeller does not have a nozzle. The propeller directly imparts a velocity change to the fluid, and that is directly transmitted as thrust. Whereas a fan causes the pressure of the air to increase, not by a large amount, by a small amount, and then because the mass flow rate of air is very large, that small pressure difference, that increase in enthalpy, is converted to kinetic energy in the fan nozzle. So that is why a fan is different from a propeller. A fan uses a nozzle to produce thrust, whereas a propeller generates thrust directly. Okay? So the fan nozzle is also called the cold nozzle because the air coming out of here is cold, and this is called hot nozzle. Okay? And in this engine you also see the fan blade containment here. Fan blade containment is a very important safety feature, and we will talk more about this later on. So you can see that this is a band that is placed in the nacelle around the fan blades. So you see this band here which is around the fan blades in the engine nacelle. And the purpose of this is to contain any fan blade which might become dislodged due to some catastrophic event. Let us say a bird hit or some other problem. If a fan blade comes loose, these blades actually they are actually quite big in size. So if it comes through, it can cause a lot of damage to the engine and to the fuselage, the cabin compartment, passengers and so on. So this is a safety feature that is a must for all turbofan engines. Okay, fan blade containment. So some of the specs of this engine, you can see that it's a low bypass ratio engine, bypass ratio 5, handles about 800 kg per second at takeoff. Fan tip diameter, as you can see how big it is, it's about 2.36 meters. So you can imagine the fan blades are quite big, right? So we have 2-stage HP turbine which drives a 14-stage HP compressor, 5-stage low pressure turbine drives fan plus a 3-stage low pressure compressor. Overall pressure ratio about 31:1. Remember, this is a medium size engine, so it's about 31:1. Turbine inlet temperature about 1600 Kelvin. The next engine that we will talk about is the GE90 engine, which is probably the biggest engine that GE offers, next only to the Gen X engine, which is the latest offering. This is probably the largest engine in service today, the biggest engine in terms of thrust produced. The biggest engine in service, you again see the same kind of thing, the fan, the moving blades of the fan, the stator blades of the fan and the fan nozzle. And then again you see the core engine, the compressor blades, the combustor, the turbine blades and the low pressure turbine blades and the hot nozzle. Okay? So this is a big engine, and this is offering from Pratt & Whitney is also comparable in terms of thrust rating and so on. And once again you see the core engine, the compressor blades, different stages of the compressor, combustor, turbine stages and then the nozzle here. Okay? The nozzle has these kinds of corrugations to enhance mixing and reduce the noise. Okay, so these corrugations generate vortices which enhances mixing in this direction and reduces the aerodynamic noise that the engine produces. You also see the fan blades, the stator vanes in the fan passage and also the fan nozzle. A comparable size engine, here is an offering from Rolls-Royce. The similar rating, you see the big fan in the front. Rolls-Royce typically tends to use 3 shafts. Okay, we will see why in a minute. So this is a fan, then there is an intermediate pressure compressor as you can see, and then there is a high pressure compressor, high pressure turbine, intermediate pressure turbine and low pressure turbine. And you can see that the air that goes through the fan, the rotating fan blades, stationary guide vanes in the fan passage, this is the fan nozzle. Okay. Similarly here you get the hot exhaust which comes out through here, the nozzle will fit here. Okay. And this stream produces about 20% of the thrust, as I said before, approximately, it varies from engine to engine, and this stream, the cold stream, produces about 80% of the thrust. Okay. Notice the in the case of multiple shafts, notice one shaft within the other. You can see the innermost shaft which drives the fan blade, and the next shaft which drives the intermediate pressure compressor, and the even bigger shaft which drives the high pressure compressors. So all these 3 shafts are placed one inside the other, and they all rotate like this at different RPMs. Okay, so they are all concentric shafts running one inside the other. And typical specs for this engine, it's about 90 to 100 kilonewtons of thrust, airflow rate about 523 kilogram per second. Again, these engines come in different specifications. Okay, same basic architecture, but with different thrust ratings and so on. This one, that the bypass ratio again ranges from 4 to 10 in this particular architecture. Fan tube diameter for all these engines are about 2 meters or so, and pressure ratio for a mid-size engine will be about 30 or so to 1. Inlet temperatures, again these are what we think they are. 1530 is probably on the lower side for this engine, but as the rating goes up, the turbine inlet temperature also will go up depending upon the engine. Okay. So we have looked at the general architecture of the turbofan engine, and let me summarize the advantages and disadvantages of a bypass engine. Okay. So not all actually is good for the bypass engines. Okay. So if you look at the high bypass ratio turbofan engines, definitely higher fuel efficiency because the propulsive efficiency is better, right? And the engines are also quieter because, as I said, the cold air mixes with the high speed hot air, thereby reducing the velocity gradients when the stream comes out of the engine and mixes with the ambient. So the aerodynamic noise is brought down. Longer engine life certainly, because 80% of the thrust is produced by components which are not exposed to high pressure or high temperature. Okay. But because the size of the engine is bigger, definitely mechanical inertia plays a role. So the acceleration of a turbofan engine is less compared to a turbojet engine. Okay. And the increased frontal area, remember now the bypass ratio is 5 or 6 or 10, that means your propeller is going to be like this to capture that much amount of air. So as the bypass ratio increases, the fan diameter also increases, the frontal area increases, which means the drag due to the nacelle also increases. So the nacelle drag increases with increasing frontal area, and at higher altitudes there is generally a degradation in the performance of the turbofan engines. Although for commercial aviation this is not a major problem, what this means is that you cannot fly this in other types of aircraft. The higher bypass ratio engines cannot be flown for flying at, let's say, 50 or 60,000 feet altitudes. They cannot go much beyond 35 to 40,000 feet altitudes. Okay. So here is a pictorial view of a high bypass ratio engine and a low bypass ratio engine. The low bypass ratio engines are typically employed for military applications, and the high bypass ratio engines are typically employed for commercial aviation applications. Okay, you can see the increase in diameter with increasing bypass ratio, and the consequent increase in the frontal drag. Okay, ultra high bypass ratio engines will have even larger areas. And as we will see later on, this would mean that you may not be able to mount an ultra high bypass ratio engine on existing aircraft wings, because the wings may be too close to the ground for ultra high bypass ratio engines. So you have to think about now the technological challenges. Where do you mount such engines? Do you mount them above the wing or on the fuselage? Where should they be mounted? Because the weight is also quite high. So where the engine is mounted is also very important. So that will have other technological challenges. Now what we are going to see next is, at least on paper, based on whatever I have shown you, it makes perfect sense to migrate to a turbofan technology from a turbojet technology. But what are the technological challenges that we will face when we decide to make such a transition? And that is what we are going to talk about, and how do we overcome these challenges. Okay? And of course, it is quite reasonable that the challenge comes from the fan, from one component, the fan. That is understandable because that is the only new thing that we have done, right? So bypass means fan, right? Other components we already know the challenges and we have already dealt with them. We saw that the high pressure turbine blade is exposed to high temperatures, high pressures and high RPM. So we decided that the blades would be cooled the blades would be fabricated using single crystals, then we will provide a thermal barrier coating. So we overcame all the challenges, right? And now we are adding a new component, the fan. Understandably, the fan poses the biggest technological challenge here. What are the challenges? Number one, for a bypass ratio, let's say of 5, above 5, okay, the diameters become quite high. So when the diameters become quite high, when the fan spins, the centrifugal loads towards the tip of the blade is going to be quite high. It will be quite high. So from that perspective, what we would like to have is that the fan should run at the lowest possible RPM because of centrifugal stress. That is one issue. The second issue is the same challenge that we had earlier with the propellers. Remember, as the tip speed increases, the tip speed may exceed the speed of sound, and then there will be shocks and losses. Okay, so that is a constraint that we already face, and so that is again going to be a constraint. Okay, so these are two major things: stress, centrifugal stress, and tip speed requirements. But at the same time, we cannot run the fan at an arbitrarily low speed because the turbine must run at the same speed to run the fan. So the lowest speed that we can get is ultimately going to be determined by the lowest speed at which we can run the low pressure stages of the turbine. We may not be able to run them at, let's say, 1000 RPM. They may have to be at a reasonable speed for the axial velocity to remain constant. Otherwise, we will not be able to get the axial velocity or the flow to go through these blade passages. They need to spin at a reasonably high speed. So that is what is going to restrict the RPM for the fan. Okay. Now, as we said earlier, this generates about 75 to 80% of the thrust. So a large number of turbine stages are required to drive it, which means that if I reduce the speed of the turbine too much, then I will not be able to get the flow to go through all the stages of the turbine. So that is a constraint that I must deal with. Now, the other thing is that the intermediate and especially the high pressure compressor, as we mentioned earlier, as the gas is compressed, the density increases, right? That means for the axial velocity to remain the same, my cross sectional area should go down. That means the blade height goes down. But as the blade height goes down, I must make sure that the air can pass through, and the only way I can do that is to spin them at high speed. So the high pressure compressor must spin at considerably higher speed than the IP compressor or the fan to maintain a constant axial velocity. Okay, that is a constraint that we have. So, but fortunately, as the core engine generates only 25% of the thrust, 1 or 2 turbine stages are sufficient to drive these compressors, intermediate and high pressure compressor, whereas this one will require a lot of turbine stages to drive it. Okay. A typical number that we are talking about for a fan, power rating for a fan, is that approximately for these types of engines, the bigger engines that I am talking about, the power that the turbine provides to the fan is of the order of about 30,000 HP or so. It's quite a large amount of power. Okay. So because we have widely different requirements for RPMs, right, the only way we can actually meet this challenge, we want the fan to run at a low speed, at the same time the other components have to run at higher RPM. So the only way we can accommodate such widely differing RPM is to have the multi-spool technology. So there was a first technological challenge that had to be overcome, and it was overcome by using a revolutionary technology called the multi-spool technology. Shafts within each other and spinning at different RPMs, and you can see the wide range of RPMs from this graphic. You can see that the high pressure turbine system runs at speeds about 10,000 RPM or more because it has the shortest blades. So this runs at speeds very high RPMs. The intermediate pressure, which is in yellow here, runs at RPMs around 3000 or so. Okay, I'm sorry, it runs at 7500 RPM or so. The intermediate pressure runs at 7500, and the fan, as you can see, runs at about 3000 RPM or so. And that is the lowest possible RPM that we can do when it is connected to directly to the turbine. So the speeds are optimized so that each unit, that is a turbine plus a compressor unit, both operate at optimum levels. Okay, so we decide upon the aerodynamics of the compressor and the turbine blades and the fan blades, so that when we couple them this way, the RPM is such that all of them operate at the best possible aerodynamic efficiency. But this is a very complex piece of technology, especially from a lubrication point of view. Having these kinds of shafts one inside the other spinning at different speeds poses tremendous challenge from a lubrication perspective. Okay? And remember, the shafts are also hollow, right? It means the weight of the blades has to be borne by these hollow shafts, which is an extremely challenging task. Previously the shaft was a solid shaft, now the shafts are hollow. Okay? So that poses a tremendous amount of challenge. Okay? The only advantage is that the fan sits on the innermost shaft, right? The HP set is the outermost one, the IP set is the inner one, the fan is the innermost one. Fortunately, the fan also is the heaviest, but fortunately the fan sits on a solid shaft, because the innermost one is a solid shaft, right? But it is still a challenge to manufacture these multiple shafts or multi-spooled shafts and make them reliable during operation. That is a very challenging task, which has been overcome by all the engine manufacturers, each in different ways. So we accommodated the first requirement, which is that the fan should run at as low an RPM as possible. So we have now come to a stage where we say that 3000 RPM is about the smallest that the fan can run at. Okay, so that is the first thing that we have done, and we have supported the difference in speeds with multiple spool technology. Okay? But the challenges do not stop there. Let us say that the fan spins at 3000 RPM. Now unfortunately, because of the bypass ratios that are required, remember the diameter is determined by the bypass ratio. Now we know the speed, so which means I can determine the tip speed. As you know, the fan tip diameter is about 2 meters or so. Knowing the RPM, I can determine the tip speed, and what happens is two things actually make one or two issues make this very difficult. Unfortunately, the fan handles the coldest air, the air that is coming into the engine, that is at the lowest temperature across the entire engine, which means that the speed of sound is also the lowest possible. Okay? That is one of the challenges. The other challenge, of course, is the RPM and the diameter. So what happens is, because of this and the RPM, you have the flow that approaches the fan is subsonic at the root section and supersonic at the tip section. Remember, you must bear this in mind, this fact in mind. I am saying the relative velocity, Mach number based on relative velocity approaching the fan, becomes supersonic. The aircraft is still cruising at high subsonic flight Mach numbers, that is this component V. The absolute velocity component V is still subsonic, right? So that is the same at root and tip, because the flight is moving forward at the same speed. There is the root section or tip section, that absolute velocity is the same, and that is subsonic. But because the blade speed varies so much from root to tip, remember this is R omega, this is also R omega, because the tip diameter is so much higher than the root diameter, this increases. So for the same absolute velocity, you can see the relative velocity is very high. So the relative Mach number, or the Mach number of the flow approaching the fan blade in a relative coordinate, is subsonic, whereas at the tip it is supersonic, which means that I have mixed flow now. The fan actually now has to be designed to handle transonic flow. And remember, this was a challenge that we faced with the propeller, but the propeller is open, okay, whereas here the fan is ducted. So there are a few things that we can do, but this is a challenge that we faced earlier, right? So we must design the fan to handle transonic flows, okay. And fan pressure ratio, remember we said that fan increases the pressure of a large amount of air, and then that enthalpy is extracted or converted to kinetic energy in the fan nozzle, okay. So typical pressure ratio in a fan is about 1.7 today, best fans 1.7, 1.8 or so, okay. How do we realize this type of pressure rise in a fan blade? Same as what we did earlier, right? What did we do earlier in the compressor? This is, remember, this is compression through deceleration of the relative component of velocity. So that means the blade passage must have the appropriate cross-sectional variation to accomplish pressure rise, decelerate the air and accomplish the pressure rise. What would the blade passage area look like if it is subsonic? It would be diverging passage area, just like our compressor. What would it be if it is supersonic? That is the reason why we studied converging diverging diffusers. How do we decelerate a supersonic stream and increase pressure rise? So it is not only useful in supersonic intakes, but it is also important in fan design. So this has to be done extremely carefully, because you know the problems that are associated with decelerating a supersonic stream and recovering the momentum as pressure. But that is essentially what we must do here when the relative Mach number becomes supersonic. So let us see how this is done. So the relative Mach number at the hub is below 1. So normally the blade section, okay, the blade section is made up of two circular arcs. Okay, so this is called a double circular arc profile for the subsonic section. It's called DCA blade profile. DCA blade profile basically is composed of, as you can see from here, two circular arcs, one on the outside, one on the inside. So there is a convex surface on that side and a concave surface on this side. That is what is used in the subsonic portion of the fan blade. And unfortunately, near the tip the flow is supersonic, and so the blades are very slender, and we need to decelerate the supersonic flow to a subsonic flow, or we need to decelerate it so that we can realize that as a pressure rise, which means that a double circular arc will not be suitable. Why will it not be suitable? So you can see from here, if I try to use the same double circular arc profile for a supersonic flow, as you can see from here, this is a convex surface. So what I have done here is I have laid out the blades like this. Okay, so I have taken the fan and I have peeled it open, and you can see the blades in succession. So this is how the flow approaches, and as you can see, when the flow approaches these blades, notice that this surface is the upper surface is a convex surface. Correct? So when a supersonic flow goes over a convex surface, what happens? Expansion fan. That was the reason why we studied Prandtl-Meyer flow. What happens to a supersonic flow that goes over a convex corner? So you can actually see that the Mach number will increase as it goes over the convex surface, but then when it has to enter this passage, you will have a strong normal shock and the flow will become subsonic, and then it will diffuse in this diverging passage. So this is very much like the normal shock diffuser that we discussed earlier, right? So this is a diverging passage, so there is a normal shock that sits in the front. So this is almost the same as a normal shock diffuser. And if you remember, the normal shock diffuser is very poor in terms of efficiency, right? Once the Mach number goes above 1.5, 1.6, we could see that the loss of stagnation pressure is very high. And that would be a terrible thing in this, because we are putting in the work to increase the stagnation pressure. So any loss of stagnation pressure is very bad in this case, right? So, and in this case what happens is, because there is this acceleration in the early part of the blade, the free stream Mach number may be 1.2, 1.3 or so, relative Mach number, but after this acceleration, that free stream Mach number, when before the normal shock, will likely be 1.7, 1.8 or maybe even 2, which means there is going to be a very high loss of stagnation pressure, which is why you cannot use the double circular arc profile for both the subsonic and the supersonic sections. Supersonic sections, we need to do something different. Okay, so we have to design the blade profile so that the passage area is also designed properly and we get proper diffusion. So this is called controlled diffusion airfoil. The airfoil or blade shape is called CDA profile, or controlled diffusion airfoil profile. Okay, so the idea is to decelerate this properly so that the terminal normal shock is not very strong. That is the general idea, and here we are looking at CDA profile. So you can see that the DCA profile has a concave portion right in the beginning. To prevent this acceleration of the flow, you can see that it has a concave corner right at the beginning, followed by a convex surface. Okay, and you can see what happens. So the free stream Mach number in this case is 1.61. Okay, and there is usually a bow shock, because the radius of curvature here is finite. There is usually a bow shock. In these types of profile, that is difficult to avoid. Okay. Even here you may see a bore shock and then expansion fan after that, okay, but the flow will still be supersonic. Okay. So, you see a bore shock, then you can see that as the flow goes around the circular leading edge, the Mach number actually increases from 1.61 to 1.76. Now, had we used a double circular arc profile, the Mach number would have increased further, right, because we have a concave corner here in this custom diffusion airfoil. You see a set of weak oblique shock waves in this concave corner which decelerates the flow. Mach number reduces, but you cannot make a blade completely out of concave surfaces. There has to be a convex surface somewhere, right. So, the concave surface transitions to a convex surface here and you see expansion fans. But by the time you hit the blade passage or the entrance of the blade passage, the Mach number has gone from 1.61 to 1.53. Okay. So, the maximum Mach number here at the just before this is about, so here it is 1.53 and here it is about 1.68. It still accelerates, but the advantage is it is almost the same as this. So, the moral of the story is we do all this hard work, right, to get back to the Mach number that we started with. That is the tricky part in designing these airfoil sections, right. That is the tricky part in placing any surface in a supersonic flow. So, we do this concave and then convex corner so that we do not get into a situation like this where the Mach number goes from a free stream value of let us say 1.6 to maybe 2 or more than that. Instead of that, this concave and convex surface, right, will ensure that by the time we hit the entrance of the blade passage, you are just at about the same Mach number as the free stream Mach number. Okay. What we will do in the next class is continue this discussion and then go forward and discuss a few more features of this transonic fan blade passages.